Week 5 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire this week. The first tight end, Darren Waller of the Miami Dolphins. So Darren Waller finally made his season debut with the Miami Dolphins. And obviously he was retired last season. They brought him out of retirement, made a trade with the New York Giants, was this Miami Dolphin team. And Waller, he didn't disappoint in his debut. 3 catches, 27 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And also going over Sauce Gardner in the back of the end zone on one of those touchdowns. So Waller now getting into the offense now. He missed the first 3 weeks of the season, and most of training camp was in with injury. And now with Tyreek Hill most likely out for the season with the dislocated knee, Darren Waller, he's going to be a big piece in this offense, especially in the red zone. They're going to use his 6'6" height and his jumping ability like we saw in the Week 4 victory versus the New York Jets. So with a good matchup coming up at Carolina, and now down Tyreek Hill, Waller's a big pickup off the waiver wire at the tight end position, and showed he still has it, and he's available 92% of fantasy leagues. Next tight end, Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Strange surprisingly still out there in 72% of fantasy leagues, and arguably he's been the most consistent option in this offense in the first month of the season for Jacksonville. Brian Thomas Jr. has pretty much been non-existent. Travis Hunter, he's playing limited snaps where he's playing defense as well. And Brenton Strange has gone out there and he's put up numbers, especially the last 2 weeks. Week 3 versus Houston, 6 catches, 61 yards on 7 targets. Week 4 at the 49ers, 6 catches, 45 yards on 7 targets. So the targets are there. Jacksonville, I know they're not scoring a lot of touchdowns, and Travis Etienne's been great in the early part of the season out of the backfield. But this week versus Kansas City, one of the best defenses in the league, and also as well an offense that's starting to put points on the board. We know Jacksonville is going to be chasing points most likely on Monday night early and often. And like I said, Brenton Strange, he's going out there. He's getting peppered with targets. Is Brenton Strange, he's got 19 in the last 3 games, and definitely a tight end for fantasy owners to go out there and get this week. The next tight end, Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. He's been on the list a decent amount, is Schultz, and he's out there in 81% of fantasy leagues is Dalton Schultz. So I've said this in other videos, the Houston Texans, they're looking for a guy to step up and be the number 2 option in the passing game, either Jaden Higgins, a Christian Kirk, or Dalton Schultz. But I think it's Dalton Schultz right now for this Texan team is the number 2 option behind Nico Collins in the passing game. So week 2 versus Tampa Bay, 3 catches, 29 yards, 4 targets. Week 3 at the Jaguars, 5 catches, 39 yards, 6 targets. And week 4 versus Tennessee, 5 catches, 30 yards, 6 targets. So the target's going to be there, looks like, for Dalton Schultz. We know he had a good season in his first year with Houston, and going back years ago with the Dallas Cowboys, he had a couple good years as well with Dak Prescott over there. So week 5 in a matchup for Baltimore, especially if Lamar's going to play in this one, most likely Houston's going to be chasing points early and often. And Dalton Schultz, we know he can work the middle of the field. The only thing with him, his yard upside isn't there, but he is getting 4 or 5 catches per game is Dalton Schultz. And like I said, there's not much going on in that passing game behind Nico Collins in Houston. So if you need a tight end, and now with buys kicking in, he's definitely a tight end I think owners could go out there and get, and he's available in 81% of fantasy leagues. Next tight end, Mason Taylor of the New York Jets. So Mason Taylor, Jets were high on him coming into the season, obviously, where they don't have much going on besides Garrett Wilson in the passing game. And Mason Taylor finally had a nice ball game in week 4. So week after week, his snaps are going up, his targets are going up. And him and Fields had a good rapport. And the other thing with Fields, going back a few years ago with the Chicago Bears, Cole Kmet had a good season with Justin Fields in their quarterback. So Fields, he feels like more to me, they're letting him loose and letting him do his thing, where last season in Pittsburgh was a game manager for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the last few games for Taylor, week 2 versus Buffalo, a catch, 5 yards, 2 targets. Week 3 at Tampa Bay, in that ball game, 4 catches, 18 yards, 6 targets. And then week 4, Miami, the 5 catches, 65 yards on 7 targets in a breakout game. It was for Mason Taylor. He's out there in tons of leagues, 94%. Good route runner, big tight end, yard after catch ability we saw in that week 4 game in Miami. In week 5, he's got an easy matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys coming to MetLife Stadium, where they can't stop anyone is Dallas. We saw it already this season, 2 games where they've given up over 35 points. Week 2, the Giants gave up 37 points, and then last week in a tie, 40-40. So I think Taylor could go out there, big target in the middle of the field. And this Cowboy team as well has one of the worst linebacking crews in all pro football. So Taylor definitely worth an ad, especially in 12-team leagues or deeper this week. In the final, tight end Theo Johnson staying in New York, but of the New York Giants. And now with Malik Neighbors out for the season, tearing the ACL, someone's going to have to step up and make plays. And we know a young quarterback always relies in key downs and third downs in the red zone on a tight end. And that's what Jackson Dart did more last week with Johnson. Had his best game of the season. Week 2 with Dallas, 4 catches, 34 yards, 5 targets. Week 3 versus Kansas City, a catch, 10 yards. And then week 4, like I said, versus the Chargers, he found Pater, 3 catches, 17 yards, and a touchdown on 5 targets. So the target's still a little bit low, 4 or 5 targets a game with seeing Theo Johnson get for this New York Giant team. This week, a great matchup, though, with the New Orleans Saints that can't stop anyone, give up a lot of points. And like I said, now with Neighbors out, those 8 to 12 targets per game, obviously going to be spread out. I think Darius Slayton's obviously going to get more targets, but Theo Johnson definitely could be a guy that steps up and gets more targets. So this week on the waiver wire, some intriguing options at the tight end position, and Johnson's available in 95% of fantasy weeks. That's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire for week 5 of the fantasy football season.